Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I believe I've got everything set up. Let me know if you see audio, video. I'd appreciate it. You guys always get me so excited when you say you like imagine music playing and like a crowd going wild, and then my heart gets racing, and then I hit live, and I realize I'm in a room by myself physically. So it's a weird sensation, but anyway. Welcome to another class. It feels like we just finished that other one from June, the vehicle class, and then here we are right into another one. So welcome everybody. I feel like I know I'm excited. I feel like there is some excitement around maybe the 2.8 thing is particularly exciting. I know it's a very hype time around Blender in general with this new huge version being actively developed. Awesome. Thanks for the confirmation on audio and video. But yeah, it's a very exciting time to be a Blender fan. And I think maybe we have some people in here who are just getting into Blender or computer graphics. And this class is going to be a perfect place to get started for that. So to continue on, well, the format of this live stream, if it's your first time, is we're going to, I have like a presentation, sort of a lecture type introduction. I don't know how long it's going to take. This is one of maybe the longer presentations. I feel like there are a lot of things to answer and address ahead of time. But so yeah, we're going to talk about conceptual things with this presentation format, and then we're going to dive into Blender and open it up for the first time, talk about what's new and different from experienced users opening 2.8 for the first time, and also just general interaction with the 3D program, how to go about that. So that being said, also if you have questions, this is the best place to, so the mannequin challenge. I thought once was silly enough, but hey, I mean, I try and be excited in the thumbnail, so let's see. Something like that, something silly like that to match the thumbnail. That's for you, Scott, just for you. Yeah, so we'll get right into I did want to say the question stuff. So please ask questions and just add the prefix question in all caps. Or, I mean, if you want to be efficient, maybe just a Q, like a capital Q, colon, and then your question. That'll be easier for me to find in the chat since it is just a simple linear chat for now. All right, so let's get into what are we here for, right? Like, why are we on this earth? Why do bad things happen to good people? These kind of questions are not why we're here in this class. Instead, we are here for beginners interested in Blender/computer graphics, often labeled CG. And that is the first level of why this class, BC1, exists. It's to be the starting point of people interested in Blender. And the next level is a little bit unique in that this is also using Blender 2.8 for the first time. So I've invited and made it a welcome place for experienced users to transition to Blender 2.8, to use this class as a first experience in 2.8. And we're all going to be learning that together. So that's the twofold purpose of the class. That's why we're here. Hopefully you're in the right place. And you're not actually looking for reviews of physical blenders that chop stuff or anything like that. But assuming we're here all for that purpose, next I wanted to go over, assuming there are beginners in here, what exactly a CG Cookie class is all about. Because there have been questions in the community thread leading up to the class that maybe think I maybe needed to go over this again. But essentially, it's a combination of all our learning formats on the website. So if you've been familiar with CG Cookie at all for the past several years, you know that we have courses, which is a collection of videos that within a specific topic. You have tutorials, which are one-off videos about a more simple topic or subject. You have exercises, which is a challenge to actually do something with what you're learning, submit an image or a model or video, and then have it graded with a pass or fail. And then learning flows, which is a collection of concepts of computer graphics, and then take you from beginner to intermediate to advanced. And then we've got live events, which is what this is. So it's the live medium where we are interacting in real time through the chat, and I am actually live here. This isn't a recording, unless you're watching it on YouTube, and then it will be a recording. But live events, and then articles, which is, you know, our written word format where we cover ideas in a written form, and then community discussion. So these are, which is a forum, like a typical forum thread. So these are all generally separate things on the site, and a class is meant to bring all of that together for a specific amount of time, with an emphasis on communal learning. That's a big introduction. Everything else is kind of self-guided, learn at your own pace, which means by yourself essentially. And the communal learning aspect is a powerful part of the class, because we're in here. If you showed up early to the stream, we've been chatting for the past hour about whatever, and so there is a much more interactive element. And I do bank on the fact that the better way to learn is with other people, with others, with a teacher who can be accessible, and that's what I'm going to be this particular amount, this 4 weeks. And so that's a big element to the class. Also, the motivation of deadlines. Since this is a specific amount of time, you have homework deadlines, and that's motivational, as proven in past classes, to be a big motivator for people to actually do work. When you're depending on yourself, if this is like a hobby interest, it's very easy to say, oh, I'll do that later, I'll do that this weekend, and then have no accountability. So the deadlines is meant to be a motivator. So that's kind of the general class. If you had any questions about it, hopefully that covered them. But let's see if I've missed, speaking of questions, let's see if I've missed anything. Is West ghosting in here? You know, I don't know. He might be, but he's also a fairly busy guy. He usually will make himself known if he is in here. Let's see. That's a coincidence. I got my old kitchen blender broken today. Let's see. Wait, question. When is 2.8 coming to Steam? Oh, I don't know about that. I'm not sure if the Blender Foundation, that would make sense if they officially like push Blender over to Steam, but I've never downloaded Blender through Steam personally. So if anyone else has that answer, I'd be curious myself. Any other question? Did you get your heart? Don't know what that means. All right, so let's go on to, let's see. Yeah, I do want to ask, what experience levels do we have in this class? If you could do me a favor, press 1 in the chat if you have been using Blender for 0 to 1 year. Press 2 if you've been using Blender for 1 to 2 years. Press 3 for more than 2 years. And then 4 is if you've been experienced with Blender, but you're mainly interested in transitioning to 2.8, and that's kind of why you're here. I'm curious to just get a pulse of what we have in here, what people are hoping to learn. So do me a favor and put that in the chat. I am quite curious. Okay, we got a 4. Awesome. Several 1s. That's great. Awesome. 3. No 2s. No one's been using it for 1 to 2 years. Interesting. 1 and 4. Awesome. 3 plus 4. Excellent. Thank you, guys. I appreciate this. Not constantly using it, though. Awesome. Now, this is really helpful to me. I'll be able to look back through this. And yeah, it seems like there's a fair amount of 1s, which I'm glad. I guess I was wondering if we would have mostly experienced people, which would be kind of awkward being like a beginner's curriculum. But it seems like we've got not only plenty of 1s, but also several 2s, 3s, and 4s. So a good mix in here, and that's great. I am really happy about that. We all have something to take away from this. Even myself, like Blender being so actively developed, I'm going to be learning new things as we go. And okay, so now that I know that we definitely have a fair amount of 1s, we're going to start at the very beginning. So we are going to talk about what Blender even is, what it's used for, and try and shed some light on some of the terminology that's basic to experienced people. But I know for me, getting into this stuff, like most of these terms, I didn't even know how to Google for. So I was very slow in getting into computer graphics. So we're going to start at the beginning. What is Blender? According to the blender.org website, this is their official definition. Blender is the free and open source 3D creation suite. It supports the entirety of the 3D pipeline, including modeling, rigging, animation, simulation, rendering, compositing, motion tracking, even video editing, and game creation. That's a ton of things. And again, the terminology can be confusing. When I was getting into it, I would see the word modeling and think, so, beautiful people having photos taken of them, that doesn't make sense. Rigging, you know, what are we talking, like an oil rig or big factory equipment? Like, what is this? Animation, that makes sense. I've watched plenty of Disney movies. Simulation, is this like The Matrix, or what are we doing? You know, rendering was a complete mystery to me. I have kind of a funny story about that, but compositing, complete mystery. Motion tracking, that makes more sense. Video editing and game creation. So some of those are pretty intuitive, but a lot of them make no sense. And even if you were here for the right reason, you might see that definition and not really understand it. So that's officially what the definition is. And then the big part that probably brought a lot of people here, or that does continue to bring people to Blender, is the fact that it's free and open source. It's free to use. It's free to change if you want to add a unique tool, or if you want to change underlying programming. It's free to share. You can put it on a flash drive and take it to your neighbor if you want. It's free to sell your work. That's a big one. Here at CG Cookie, we have an underlying motivation and inclination to teach a level of curriculum that can truly take a person from no experience to marketable professional with your level of skills that you learn from us. That is a goal of ours. And so if you use Blender, that's particularly great because you're free to sell your work. You don't have to pay the Blender Foundation anything to be able to do that, to legally be able to sell models you build, or be able to participate in a commercial venture using Blender. So that's a big deal. Now, I want to back that up with the fact that free and open source is not new. It's been around for a long time. And there's a certain connotation that validly is associated with free or open source, in that you get what you pay for. So if you pay for a very expensive application, chances are it's more polished, it's a more reliable software, and open source is particularly quirky. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. Is it actively developed? Who knows? It's up to the discretion of the guy or girl volunteering their time. And that's valid for most of the free and open source world, in my opinion. I think of my experience with Linux and numerous attempts at trying to convert and transition completely from Windows or Mac over to Linux, and being all hyped about it, and then realizing it's so quirky and it's unintuitive, in my opinion, and hard to use that I inevitably end up going back. Or I think of GIMP and the fact that I should be able to use GIMP, but it's just not quite good enough, in my opinion, compared to professional apps. All that to say, Blender is unique in my experience, having used the commercial apps, having used Maya professionally, Max professionally, ZBrush, Mudbox, Mental Ray, V-Ray, 3D Coat. I've used all those and very seriously and loved them, and then got into Blender because I couldn't afford them. And Blender is a true alternative to those apps. I will stake my flag in the sand for that. It is definitely a legitimate alternative, and it's a unique open source application because of that. So Blender is a gift, frankly. Like, the fact that that's the reality, it's a gift to us, and it's been a gift to me. I've used it professionally for years. So if you find that you end up liking Blender and you end up using it, I want to encourage you to consider donating, because even though it's free to use, it's not free to build and create. Like, it didn't come out of nowhere. It's hard work of the community and the devs that need to be compensated for the work. And so consider donating. It's not required, but just consider it if you get into Blender. So wanted to pitch that there at the beginning. It's free to use, but don't take it for granted. So that's what Blender is. Let's talk about what Blender can do. Now we're going to get into some exciting things. If that wasn't exciting enough, we're going to talk about what we can create, because chances are we're all here because we know that Blender can create like anything visual. Like anything visual, Blender can create it. And that is that's an insane power that we have, and that it facilitates. So let me see if I've missed any questions before I get into this real quick. Don't think so. Love that you guys are chatting it up. All right, so the first thing that Blender can do is visual effects, often abbreviated VFX. You'll see that a lot if you get into this stuff. And visual effects is the idea of using your computer to generate visuals that are realistic and convincing enough to fit into live action, like actual filmed material. So up at the top up top left we have Transformers. You can't go to Walmart or Home Depot and buy a 100-foot tall transforming autonomous robot. They just don't exist. Boston Dynamics is trying to do that in a way, but they're pretty far behind. And because of that, if someone wants to make, Michael Bay wants to make a movie about Transformers, he needs the artists, the digital artists that can create the visual effects, create that stuff in the computer, and make it look completely convincing and realistic in order to convince people going to the movie to suspend belief for that hour and a half, 2 hours, and immerse themselves in the story. Now, Transformers maybe isn't the good example for immersing into the story, but there are others. Benjamin Button and Gravity, I think, is a great one, where the visual effects are so believable, but that you don't notice them. Anyway, that's the power of visual effects. Also, like comets, I use that as an example because you can't predict where a comet's going to land enough to cinematically set up a camera and frame it properly to capture a comet, coming into the atmosphere in a cinematic way. That's just not possible. So you're going to create it digitally. And then finally, over on the right, we can see an example of an Avengers film that has the before shot, the actual raw film footage at the bottom, which it looks hilariously fake, not hilariously unlike what the final result is, in that we have this big green screen, which is only designed to be removed in the computer. We have Mark Ruffalo dressed up in this silly jumpsuit with a bunch of dots all over it, acting like the Hulk. He's completely removed, and then the dots are used to track the motion, apply it to the digital Hulk, so that we capture his performance. Same thing with Robert Downey Jr. down here in his Iron Man suit. And then the background, again, is completely removed, and New York is built digitally in the computer. So that is the power of visual effects. And if you go to the movies at all, you see a lot of visual effects, plain and simple. Even romantic comedies now have wide use of computer graphics because as unromantic as this is, it's easier to film, an outside shot in a warehouse and then replace the background with a tropical island. It's much cheaper than actually filming in the tropical island. So that's the power of visual effects, for good, for better, or for worse. Now, you must be thinking, I'm sure some of you are thinking, wait, are you telling me that Transformers, Comets in Armageddon, for example, and the Avengers was created with Blender? No, I would guess no. I have no way of knowing for sure because I didn't work on these projects, but my guess is that no, they would use commercial software. Blender is growing in popularity and it's being recognized for its legitimacy and capability. We have plenty of examples, more every year, of top tier studios and artists at those studios using Blender. Sean Kennedy is a big one, who one of the first that I remember, who worked at Rhythm and Hughes, working on huge productions and including Blender in his personal workflow there. So I know that it is used, but can Blender do this stuff can Blender do this stuff in the hands of the right artists? I have no doubt in my mind at all that it could, and it does. So up here in the top left, covering up Transformers, this is a Blender artwork from a talented artist. In my opinion, without a doubt, the same quality, the same quality as Transformers. Like, it's a beautiful image. In the hands of the right artists, Blenders can do this stuff. Right here, over the comet, this is from our very own Jonathan Lampell, a tutorial he did a while back before he joined CG Cookie, and it's a pretty realistic comet falling out of the sky, completely done with Blender. And then finally, from the open source movie Tears of Steel from the Blender Foundation, this is an example of a movie that was filmed on green screen, live action, composited with visual effects from Blender, completely done in Blender, motion tracking, 3D elements, rendering, compositing, all of it is done. So my argument is very, very certain that Blender can do all of the top tier quality in the hands of the right artists. And that I do not say lightly. And anyway, it's a powerful software. So if you're into VFX, Blender is the right way to go, especially if you want to try it out and not pay hundreds of dollars. All right, so moving on. Beyond visual effects, Blender can also do animation, where there's nothing filmed. Everything is computer generated, from your Pixar movies, your Disney movies, or your DreamWorks movies, and Disney movies. Like, these are the things that are often, I think, mistakenly called kids movies, but Blender can do that as well. In the bottom left, we have Cosmos Laundromat, another Blender open source movie that was completely done in Blender, and Blender's amazing for this kind of thing. We see shorts come out all the time that were completely done with Blender. And then also, like, beyond film, you know, or beyond movies or short films, you know, kids TV kids TV shows. My son is 3 and he loves all kinds of shows, and almost all of them, actually, I would say all of the ones that he watches are computer generated. So it's a very, very prevalent skill to be able to create full computer graphic animation. Blender can do it for sure. Also, game asset creation. Blender is used a lot for game assets specifically. I don't say game development entirely in Blender, though it used to have a game engine. It wasn't, it was maybe a little bit half-baked. It didn't take off like the rest of Blender, and so it wasn't widely adopted as a legitimate game development solution. And game asset is, I should clarify, game asset creation is the visuals that you see on screen, so your models, your textures, you know, your scene building, like that kind of stuff, even UI elements. That's game asset creation. Game development is the underlying programming and technical things under the hood that actually make the game function. So Blender is great for the game asset creation, and it's used a lot. And in the bottom left and right, the left is an Eevee example from a tutorial, a CG Masters tutorial, I believe, about setting up an Eevee sci-fi scene. And Eevee is an exciting upcoming thing with 2.8 that takes Blender into a new level of game asset creation. And then on the right, this is actually a CG cookie game that we made for iOS called Eat Sheep. You can still find that on the store, on the App Store, I believe. I hope I'm not wrong about that. It's a pretty old game. We don't maintain it that well, but it was completely made with Blender and Unity. So all the game assets created with Blender and all the development done with Unity. So Blender is great for that kind of thing, and Blender does a lot more. It does, as I mentioned in the description, in the official description of what Blender is, the video editing. Like, it has a pretty legit video editor built into Blender, so you can render your sequences out and edit your short film. All of the short films from the Blender Foundation are edited with the video sequence editor is what it's called. So that, I mean, it's a little bit quirky, I'll admit, because, you know, I edit a bunch of tutorials, and I kind of prefer Premiere, but that's not to say that's not completely a legitimate solution. 2D animation, you know, the grease pencil. Oh my goodness, the update recently, within the last couple weeks, of the grease pencil, the complete rewrite and full featured development of a grease pencil means we have a fully featured 2D animation pipeline right within Blender. So your hand-drawn stuff, you know, think of Flash, that kind of format can be done in Blender now. It's insane that we have that ability. Absolutely insane. Shout out to the developers who recently made that possible. And also motion tracking. So I personally have never seen motion tracking or video editing, for that matter, in a 3D package, any of the professional ones that I've used. I don't know if they've introduced that recently, but usually that's a third-party app, like Synthesize is the big one that I've used before, and where you track data to get to create a 3D scene from filmed footage. That's how you get digital assets over top of film. And Blender has one built in, and from all accounts I've read, it's a pretty good one. So that's crazy. 3D printing, now that's a wide new frontier of printing objects from computer models, and Blender can model those things. It's used commonly to build models of 3D print. Each one of these things should have its own like learning flow on CG Cookie, and maybe it will, you know, that would be the goal. But anyway, I just wanted to try and summarize the wide spectrum of creative ability that Blender facilitates. Literally anything visual that you want to create, Blender can do it, and that's what got me into Blender. I assume that's why you're here, and it's good to be reminded of why we're here and the excitement the exciting potential that Blender brings to us. So hopefully you're excited, you're ready to get into this stuff, and now I should address the elephant in the room. Blender 2.8 That's what we're teaching before release. It is an alpha state. Am I crazy? I saw some some comments on YouTube about people saying it's too early to teach this. What are you doing? And that's a fair argument. We are in the alpha stage of Blender 2.8, so things are bound to change. I just don't think that the core aspects are going to change that much. You know, viewport navigation, translation, rotation, transformation of objects. I just don't think that stuff's going to change. General UI layout, because we're in alpha stage. You know, once you reach alpha, you're starting to commit to the final version that you're going to release. So I don't think it's going to change that much. But even if it does, let's be honest with ourselves. Blender is in constant development. Things are changing daily. You know, for a couple of years, Blender was being released like every 2 months, a new version. Things are changing all the time. Part of being a digital artist is being able to adapt to stuff changing. And so if between this week and next week, a radical change has happened in Blender, you and I will go through that together. We'll figure it out. We'll address it, and we'll be better for it. We'll be adaptable in that way. And so I'm not worried about it. I don't think you should be either. We'll just learn together and get a head start on 2.8 before it's released. That's kind of the goal. All right, so a couple things that either came as questions from the thread, but also it came up with me, I guess, when I was playing with 2.8 that I would address right away. Let me just make sure I'm not missing any questions. Question: have you worked in the industry in any way? Yes. So I spent about 3 years in the professional industry. I got a job at a studio in Minneapolis working on commercials, and did we do anything else besides commercials? A couple personal, you know, like studio projects to build our portfolio. So I learned a ton there. That was a great studio. Went to Texas and worked at a studio called Real Effects, where we did bigger entertainment projects. So the Minion Mayhem ride at Universal Studios, I worked on that. Worked a lot on that. And then we worked on a movie, our first movie called Freebirds. Freebirds. It was originally called Turkeys. During development. It's called Freebirds. It was not a good movie, but it came out around Thanksgiving of 2013, I believe. Anyway, so I worked on those projects, and then got hired at CG Cookie and have been here ever since. So that's my personal professional experience, I guess. Any other questions? Question: is the fluid sim better? I'm not sure if. I think what you might be thinking of is the Flip Fluids add-on. It's actually a third-party tool that's built for Blender. Well, it's at least heavily incorporated into Blender. I think it's going to be incorporated elsewhere too as kind of a standalone feature. But like the Flip Fluids add-on is incredible, and we did a tutorial on it. If you check the CG Cookie YouTube channel, oh no, wait, let me take you there real quick. It's we go to 3D Blender, tutorials, and Flip Fluids. I recommend checking out this video. It goes over that add-on and how vastly improved the fluid simulation is for that. So yeah, definitely take a look into there. Anything else I'm missing? I don't think so. Awesome. Back to the numbers. Yeah, Flip Fluids is amazing. Cool. All right. Well, where was I? Yeah. So some Blender 2.8 FAQ. Will 2.8 change from alpha to beta to release candidate? Yeah, I actually went over that already. Chances are things are going to change. Maybe a button will go from this menu to that menu, or buttons will be slightly rearranged on the header. I've seen that stuff already happen. But from where it is now, I really don't think that much of the core application is going to change. I might eat my words, but alpha means something. You know, there's a reason they went into alpha instead of all the other versions that weren't in alpha. You know, alpha means something. So another question: do I have to uninstall previous Blender installs whenever using Blender? No, you don't. I actually keep. Let me show you here. So I actually keep all of my Blender installs in the, I'm on a Mac, by the way, so applications in a Blender folder right here. And I have several versions all the way from 2.71, I still have that installed. Maybe I could delete that. It's from June 2014. But yeah, I keep several versions installed. Sometimes different versions of Blender have various tools that are either that work differently or sometimes are removed entirely that I prefer. So that's a very nice thing about Blender. You don't have to uninstall the old versions. And someone asked that in the chat, in the community thread, I believe. So I figured it would be smart to address that. Can I upload 2.8.blend files to Sketchfab? Currently, I don't believe so. Sketchfab seems to error out. And the reason this is important is in past classes, I have asked for Sketchfab models to be posted into the community thread as homework submissions. Like if you're building a model, upload it to Sketchfab. That way I can see the actual 3D model. But for this class, I think it's going to be best if we just post images of the models because the 2.8 .blend file is not yet compatible with the Sketchfab system or the other way around. So that was also a question in the community thread. I'll show you where you get 2.8 as soon as we get done with the. That's going to be one of the first things I go over, how to download it and install it. Tips for transitioning to Blender 2.8 on page 4 of the class thread. That's thanks to Jake Carosi. He's in here in the chat. So he has taken it upon himself. By the way, if you're at oncgcookie.com and you're not aware of this, go to the community button, forum, and for the duration of the class, the thread, which is the home page essentially of the class, is attached to the top. That's where you can find it. And on page 4, Jake has been using Blender 2.8 and been documenting some tips for transitioning and some gotchas. He's been documenting that. So there's a large post here. And admittedly, by putting this on the stream for everybody, I'm kind of maybe subtly challenging Jake to maintain this throughout the month, or throughout the month. And as we stumble on new things or as other quirks get removed, like we'll keep this accurate, and I think this will be a good resource for people to check back, go to page 4, and see this kind of helper guide to transitioning. Question from Hashir. Are you good at 2D drawing, and do you think it's necessary for a 3D artist to be at least decent at 2D art? I get this question a lot, and it must be a pretty common concern, I suppose. So I did draw with pencil and paper a lot in my early life. So I grew up drawing and loving to draw from like literally age 3. I have this silly story my mom loves to tell about how the doctor wanted to see how I could draw, and I drew this relatively detailed baseball player, and the doctor freaked out about it. So I've been drawing since 3, and then up into high school, I was drawing and doing sketches for people, like sketching family members and doing like graphite portraits basically, and that was kind of it. I got over what I think now looking back is it was felt like a limited format, the pencil and paper, and I haven't drawn since then, to be honest. And that's when I discovered computer graphics and got into that. So that's my personal history. I do not think you need to be a 2D artist to be good at 3D. That's not a requirement at all. It definitely would help, if you're an artist in 2 dimensions to be able to be an artist in 3D. But it's not a requirement. I think we gosh, I want to say I know we've covered this before, whether Tim did it or something. He, spent more time on it. But in short, no, you don't. It would help. And frankly, like photography helps computer graphics, cinematography, filmmaking, getting into that stuff, that will help you. The thing about computer graphics that I think is so cool is it's in a way like recreating reality, from recreating light simulation to particle hair, like with hundreds of thousands of follicles on a head, or fur for a dog. Like you're recreating so much of reality, reflections, gosh, what else? Like skeletal structures to make things move, shaders and materials. Like you're creating so much of reality that it actually, you realize that everything in life can inform how you do computer graphics. So it's a neat hobby that has an expansive scope. So I'm saying that in that if you're interested in any of those other things, it's going to inform your computer graphics in a positive way, your computer graphics skills in a positive way. All right, so I believe I've answered this answer these questions. Yeah, I do have an IMDb page. I mean, you know, nothing since joining CG Cookie has been IMDb worthy. I was working on another movie for Real Effects out of freelance capacity, but then the movie got canceled, so I was pretty bummed about that. But anyway, the prestige of being on IMDb and like working in the industry, sometimes I miss it, but ultimately I love CG Cookie and what I do here. So let's get back into this FAQ. Okay, so yeah, thanks Jake for maintaining that 2.8 transition guide. I would love if you continued throughout the month. Okay, homework is due each Sunday before midnight your time. That's your relative time. Because the way I imagine it working is everyone's Monday through Sunday is like the week each week. Being the weekend is usually when people have the most time to do work. And so I want to give you like Friday, Saturday, Sunday to like do the majority of your work. And then on Monday is kind of the beginning of the next week and when I start grading stuff. So please just submit your homework to the class thread with the title in bold, homework week 1, for example, and then that way I'll be able to notice what kind of post it is. Yeah, so Sunday before midnight, your own time. Also, if you've completed an exercise designated as homework, you don't have to do it again. So if we look back at the community thread, and this serves as the home page, and the description up here, this is the outline, the syllabus for the whole class. Yeah, so the homework for week 1 is this model with primitives exercise. And if you've already done this, you don't need to do it again. Just link me to your submission that you've already done, and that'll just, you know, give me a check mark for you having completed this part of the curriculum already. Someone asked about that, so I figured I'd address it. And then how do I share .blend files or files in general in the class thread? So we do have a lot of experienced people in here, and being experienced, you guys have been awesome and said, how about we participate at a level where we share our blend files? What if we go beyond the beginner's scope and we add some simple materials or add some lighting that's not required of the beginners, and we share those blend files as resources? We are helpful to people. And so I think that's awesome. That's a great initiative, great way to be active this month if you're an experienced user. And on the community thread, currently it's very locked down, and I'm trying to change this, but like we can't embed, we can't upload files, and we can't like embed stuff right now. It's annoying. But if you want to share a blend file, just upload it to Dropbox or Google Drive, something like that, and then paste a link in here so that we can download it. That's going to be the best way because you can't hyperlink and add links into these posts. So that's going to be the best way to share those blend files. And please do share them because we'd love to be informed about how you guys do stuff. All right, what are homework grades all about? I've polled you guys about how valuable grades are to you, and though some of you have said like you don't really care much about getting a letter grade, it doesn't do much for you. Several of you have said that it is helpful, and that is the goal, to just, you know, give you some sort of metric based on, you know, me looking at it and trying to remember where you're coming from, your context, your skill level, and how it meets the requirements of the homework assigned. And then I just give you a letter grade to kind of give you confirmation, you know, in a metric. But it's an imperfect system, as all grades are. But if at the top of the, let me show you real quick, at the top of the thread right now, the latest announcement, number 2, is from Zolt. He has made another report card. He's been volunteering this document and maintaining it since month 1, or since the first class, and that's where the report card can be found. When you open that, right now it's blank, but we're going to be filling it out to look like this, where, you know, I'm going to keep track of your names, where the exercise is in the thread, and your letter grade if you want to keep track of that. So you have access to open and view that. And then, all right, so we're kind of rounding out the presentation, and we're going to get to work. Oh, that isn't formatted correctly. So the week 1 agenda, what are you going to do this month? I want to challenge you to spend an hour each day with Blender 2.8 or 2.79. I don't want to require you to do 2.8. If you want to stick with 2.79 and you think like that's going to be more reliable for the next several months, that's fine. Go ahead and do 2.79. I don't want to force anybody to do Blender 2.8, but I want you to spend an hour a day in one of the versions of Blender so that if you're a beginner, you're going to start getting familiar with hotkeys and with navigating, and it's just time is what's going to make it more familiar to you. It's pretty simple like that. When I've been getting into 2.8, when I got into 2.8, the first week was particularly frustrating because hotkeys, like core hotkeys, were different, and yeah, the first week was just frustrating. If you follow me on Twitter, I vented a little bit of that frustration just because it was more different than I expected. But after that first week, it's been fairly smooth sailing since then. So I think a week of spending an hour each day will get you in a familiar place with Blender where it's less frustrating and more fun. Optionally, watch the new Blender Basics course that has just come out. It is with 2.79, but it's from Grant, and there are concepts that he teaches. Let's go find that real quick. Blender 3D and, okay, course, Learn the Blender Basics. Right here, this has a lot of good information from Grant. He's a great teacher, a unique teacher at CG Cookie, and he teaches these concepts that, though it's with 2.79, a lot of the concepts are true with 2.78. So yeah, just if optionally, you're welcome to review that course if you need some video tutorials in between live streams, that kind of thing. So the homework assignment is to create a scene out of primitive shapes. And we're going to do that in the demonstration part of the live stream. Once I finish the presentation, I'm going to open up Blender 2.8 and we're going to have fun in there. And I'm going to talk about the primitives exercise. But that's all listed again in the class thread at the very top. In the description is the homework assignments. All right, volunteer assistance. So this is if the class gets pretty big, like 50 plus people, I'm probably going to need some help in like keeping track of questions, being able to answer questions, and keeping track of homework assignments, that kind of thing. So if you want if you're an experienced Blender user and you're in here and you want to volunteer your time to be able to be a resource to people, answering questions in the community thread and general presence in that community thread, grading homework. If it is more than 50 people, I might actually need your help grading homework, but that's a maybe. And then documenting homework grades. If you want to help me at this capacity, please email me at kent@cgcookie.com with the subject, I volunteer as tribute. That would be helpful to me. And I know that some of you have already offered that to me in past weeks or at the end of the last class. But it'd be helpful if you could just send me another one so that I can keep them all together. And yeah, volunteer assistance, that's going to be a big help to me. So yeah, if you're interested, please email me. And I think this is fine. Yeah, this is the end. All right, ground rules. I do want this to be ultimately a very welcoming place for beginners. I think with any hobby, including Blender, sometimes it's hard to get into it because you feel like everyone else is so far ahead of you and maybe you're not going to get there or as fast as you want, or maybe not at all. And whereas if the community was just more welcoming and didn't look at you, it didn't look at beginners, didn't look down on beginners or kind of write them off. I've experienced that in other communities. That's a pain. That's a big loss. And so this community, even though I have these ground rules, this community has been incredible. If you watched the last class, I kept praising this community for just being an incredible resource to each other. I really don't think there's any worry for this to actually happen, but just wanted to put it out there. I want this to be a welcoming place. No question is too dumb or too beginnerish. Also, the don't flexing thing, we talked about that in the community thread. I think we've got that handled, what that means, but just basically in a word, if you're an experienced user, don't come in here looking to show off. I think that's going to be obvious to people, and that's not what this is about. So be a resource. If you're an experienced user, be a resource to people. Answer questions. Show people how to do things that they're unsure about. That's how you're going to be a huge help here. So stick around. Don't just bail because it's for beginners. Stick around and be a resource. That would be awesome. A question. Yeah, so I'm seeing the grades do become XP at the end of the class. So if we look back at the grades, over here, this is how I calculate. An A is 40 points, a B is 30 points, C 20, D 10, and F or incompletion is a 0. And And then if you get an A+, that's an additional 5 points. A B+ is 35 instead of 30, that kind of thing. So yeah, people can walk away with a chunk of XP by the end of the class. So you are getting XP, you know, for the grades. They are converted at the end. Whew, how long is that? A 45-minute, yeah, 45-minute presentation. I was afraid that was going to take a while. But if you have any questions, let me know about the format or the class in general, 2.8 as we go. Let them rip. We're all going to learn this stuff together. All right, with that said, Blender 2.8, how do we get it? Where do we download it from? Let's start there. I'm going to go to Google and type blender.org. And I'm going to go to download. At the very bottom, there's this Go Experimental section. And this is where you can download experimental builds, including 2.8, as it says in the description. Let's click on that. And this is where you can find Blender 2.8. Here's the tag of the variation for your operating system, Windows, Linux, or Mac OS X. Now, I have Mac OS X, so I would go down here and download this file. What's fun about this is a new version is up here basically every day, sometimes multiple times a day. So right before I started the stream, I did download this latest version from today. And I have it open, but I haven't messed around with it, so we'll see if anything's different. But you download this as a zip file, and then I'll open up my Finder again. And so in my downloads, this, where is it? Oh, I must have removed it already, bummer. So it comes as a zip file, and imagine this dragonoid.zip is the file. You can drag it over to Blender, or in my case, I keep a Blender folder where I keep all of my installs. You can unzip it right here, and it'll come in a folder, and then you just find Blender within that folder, double click on it, and that's how you install it. It's very simple. It doesn't come with an installer, which, you know, to me, an installer is like, I don't know where these files are necessarily going, but I guess it's fine. You know, that's kind of how I think of installers. They're good and they're convenient, but like Blender is super convenient, super customizable. Also, it's like 109 megabytes for this massive program. That's insane. You know, like if you ever used Maya or 3ds Max, like gigabytes of either a download, or back in the day it was on CDs, multiple CDs. So it's kind of crazy Blender's so small. But that's where you download it, and that's how you install it. And then when you launch it, you're going to see this 2.8. And it's drop dead gorgeous. Let's just take a moment and wow. I mean, can you believe this is an open source app? It looks so good. That is the first thing I noticed about 2.8, just how beautiful of a design refresh it's been. Let me see if I'm missing any questions. Okay, add-ons from 2.79 to 2.8. How does one go about this? Currently, add-ons are, as a whole, disabled. Like, you cannot install add-ons currently for 2.8. I think it's because it's in such a developmentally intense period of time that they're just not bothering with all the stuff that add-ons could break, and they've just turned them off completely, with the exception of a couple. Let's see if we open up our preferences, add-ons. So yeah, upgrade 2.8 upgrade required. You'll see that on all these add-ons. There's just a couple unique ones like dependency graph debug. So basically, don't think of add-ons as being compatible yet. That they will be eventually, and all our favorite add-ons will have to be updated to work with 2.8. So that's kind of a bummer. You know, your hard ops or even Retopo Flow, you know, will have to be upgraded to work with 2.8. But that'll all happen in time. It's not a unique feature to Blender. GUI is so pretty. I agree. I never really, I mean, 2.4, I did think that was kind of an ugly program. 2.5 I thought was much improved. I never really thought it was ugly, but then I saw 2.8 and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is beautiful. Let me see if I'm missing any other questions. Oh yeah, there was a question I missed about XP. Okay, if we can't upload our files to Sketchfab, how do we send you the homework? So I've upgraded, just to go over this one more time, I have updated the homework assignment to be just post an image and link to your exercise page. Post an image. So I used to have Sketchfab in there, post image or post a Sketchfab embed, and I've removed the Sketchfab. So just the requirement for now is, for this class is images only. So we can bypass the Sketchfab thing. Awesome. All right, back to Blender 2.8. So yeah, we let's see where to begin. I think the context that I'm gonna approach this primarily is gonna be beginner, but also I'm not gonna be able to help to acknowledge like changes from how 2.79 worked. So that's kind of the context we're approaching this from. If you've used Blender before, you'll recognize that we have similar elements in here, like our camera, our light, and our cube. So there is familiarity, but you'll notice that the tool tab is very different. It's much prettier with big buttons and cool icons. The headers have all been moved to the top of our view of any of the panels, whereas in previous versions the header was at the bottom, and you can still switch it there. Toggle, let's see, flip to bottom. So this is how it used to be with object mode and stuff like that. But there is a thread within Blender 2.8 that I believe is trying to be more industry standard, more conducive to industry standards. And one of those, I think, is moving the header to the top, because it's called a header, not a footer, you know, and so it is kind of strange that it has been at the bottom. Same thing with the timeline, that's been changed, but I think it's for the better. And then we have a lot of different, these overlay things. These are very different, and they're, I think, a big improvement from what they used to be. But I'm not going to go over that stuff yet. I'm going to try and keep this more beginner, imagining that most of you have opened Blender for the first time. And the first thing you're going to want to do in Blender is orbit around the viewport, is navigate around the viewport. And so everything within Blender deals with the middle mouse button. So you can, if I click the middle mouse button and rotate around my mouse, move my mouse around, I'll start to orbit around my 3D scene. And if I hold Control and middle mouse click and drag, I am dollying my camera in and out. This is not zooming, this is dollying, actually moving the camera physically forward and backward. That's what Control plus middle mouse button is doing. And then Shift plus middle mouse button is panning. It's physically moving the camera in 3D space. So those three are going to be second nature to you. They have to be second nature to you in order to feel comfortable in navigating around 3D space. Don't stick your footer in your mouth. So get comfortable with that. This week, if you're brand new to Blender, please take time, do middle mouse button, orbit around, Control middle mouse button, dolly in and out, Shift middle mouse button, and pan. Get used to that. In addition to navigating around, you can also focus on certain objects. So if I select the camera here and hit period on my number pad, that will focus in on this particular object, and now when I orbit, you can tell that I'm focused right in the center of the window on that object. So get used to that, selecting and hitting the number pad period key, and orbiting around certain objects. Okay, that's going to be crucial. I mean, you can't do anything in 3D without navigating, so you got to start there. Speaking of selection, I have traditionally been a left-click select guy. I think, interestingly, Blender 2.8 is still maintaining the right-click select default, which, you know, if the idea is to be more industry standard, I'm not sure why they haven't switched that, because right-click select, I've never seen a program in my life that uses right-click select. But that's how Blender is by default, and you can find that. Preferences are now in the Edit menu, not in the File menu. So Edit, User Preferences, again, that's more industry standard. Preferences are often in the Edit menu, not the File menu. So within that, if I go to Interface, that's not where I want to go. Input, I have Select with Left enabled. Right is the default. And, you know, I wonder if maybe for this video, I'll try right-click select, because that would truly get me onto a default status with Blender. So maybe I'll try that. I think it's very strange to right-click select with stuff, but maybe it won't be that big of a deal. Yeah, local view, Jake, you mentioned local view is not here yet. It is coming back, but it's not here yet. Question, do you have rotation in turntable or trackball? That is another thing that I use turntable, not trackball. I can show you quickly what that is if anyone's wondering. If you go to User Preferences, back to Input, Orbit Style, you can do trackball. Some applications use this where it doesn't keep the 3D ground, well, the plane, the grid actually is what it's called. It doesn't keep that flat on the ground. You know, I can orbit around any direction. And I'm just more used to the turntable, which does leave the grid flat on the floor. So that's my preference. And that's where you can change it into input turntable. And then it brings up how to flatten back out the grid, how I just did that. It brings up the one hotkey on the number pad. That goes to your front orthographic view. 3 on the number pad goes to your right orthographic view. 7 goes to your top orthographic view. Those are pretty important keys when you're navigating around 1, 3, and 7. Those are your orthos, your standard orthos. Now, we used to be able to toggle quad view. Wonder if that's still a thing. Does anyone know about toggling quad view, where we have, like, you know, a quadrant? Let's see here. If you have a doubt about where a tool is, go to your edit menu up here and look for operator search. That's the old space bar where we can type in a command. I'm looking for, okay, so it looks like quad view is not there anymore currently. Control-Alt-Q, Control-Alt-Q. There it is. Okay, so it is there. How did you get there? View, frame select. Wow, it's right there. No? Viewport, navigation. Okay, I'm not sure how you... Oh, there it is. It's an area toggle quad view. Thank you. So if you come from like Maya or 3ds Max, the standard over there is a quad view. And let's see, this where the upper right is your perspective, and you've got your top ortho, front ortho. So I did use this for the vehicle course, but typically I don't model with this. I find that Blender's default of one large view is pretty nice, because you can easily hit 1 on the number pad to go to front orthographic, 3 side, 7 top. And in 2.8 it's different because it automatically switches to ortho from perspective. That I think is an upgrade, rather than having to hit the 5 key, which takes you from orthographic to perspective. When you hit 1, it automatically changes that to orthographic. That's cool. All right, so that's what we've been talking about, navigating around. We've talked about selection. So now if you do, you know, depending on if you choose right-click select or left-click select, currently I'm using the default right-click select just for fun, trying to get used to that. Yeah, okay, trackball, Pavel, you mentioned that trackball navigation can be useful in sculpting. That's absolutely true. That's the only time I've ever really used it, is trying to get your camera into a very weird view, like maybe under the armpit or something like that. It is certainly useful in certain situations. And I think Jonathan Williamson primarily uses trackball, so it's preferential as well. Let's see, I've been showing you some hotkeys about, well, your navigation keys. It used to be only hotkey by themselves, you know, like the whole orbiting stuff. But now in Blender 2.8, we do have the ability to click on a button, right? So this button right here, switch the current view from perspective to orthographic. We have a button for that now. You can click this camera view, and that takes you into the camera. Like, so we have a camera in the scene over here, and if you want to look through that camera, you can press this button. It's also the 0 number pad key is the hotkey. But then you can also pan your view by clicking that button, or zoom in and out by clicking that button. So that's a good way to navigate without using a hotkey. That's new to 2.8. I think, you know, trying to give a nod to less hotkey dependency. Though I don't see like an orbit somehow, which is interesting. Just pan and zoom and dolly. All right, where to next? We've talked about navigation. So I'm trying to get you to a point, if you're brand new, to get to a place where you're able to create your primitives scene and do that homework exercise. And so once you learn to navigate around 3D space, it's time to start creating objects. You can grab the handles in the color navigation to orbit. Oh. Interesting. So you can just click on this circle in general to orbit. This circle that shows the axes, that's pretty cool. This kind of stuff is very common in other 3D applications. It has been for years, but Blender hasn't adapted that way, or but it has with this version. Okay, you got it. Yep, you guys are right. See, I mean, I'm learning stuff too. Silent Heart, but hotkeys are fun. Yeah, what I like about Blender is there are so many hotkeys that you can work super fast. So over time, once you are used to the hotkeys, like I can hide this entirely, right? If we hide the gizmo, like those things are gone and I have a little bit more real estate, you know, that can be a preference, and I just have my hotkeys. I don't need those buttons at all. But Blender is very customizable in that way. I love hotkeys as well. All right, so we're ready to start adding objects and duplicating objects. With the idea of the primitive scene being creating some sort of scene or a model using just primitives. You can find the primitives menu by hitting add, the add menu up here, pretty self-explanatory, and then mesh is a polygon model, and you've got plane, cube, circle, UV sphere, icosphere, several options in there, including the famous monkey head that Blender, you know, it's kind of like the teapot from 3D Studio Max. So this is how you can add objects. Mesh, let's add a UV sphere. Now we've got, you know, a sphere on top of a cube. Wild modeling. You can also access the add menu by hitting Shift A in the viewport. That will bring up your add menu, same hotkey as it was before. And so as you add an object, you see that I moved it around. And in order to what's the word? I always get it. Not translation, but in order to transform an object, and that word is used to be rotation, scale, and translation as well. So translation is over here in the tool panel. It's called grab over here. And if I click that, it opens up these handles, or it reveals these handles that we can click and drag, moving in the x-axis side to side, moving up and down in the z-axis, that's the blue axis, and then moving back and forth. So those are your three axes, your three dimensions in 3D space. And that's how you translate or move an object. If you want to rotate an object, click rotate in the tool panel. And then you can rotate according to the specific axis that you choose. All right, very straightforward. In addition, there's this white circle around the rotation, and you can rotate according to the angle that you're viewing your object at. That can come in handy. And then finally, scale, as you would imagine. Let's see, you can see that the scale is kind of acting a bit funny. Once you know, maybe I'm getting close to gimbal lock or something. That's too advanced. So you have your scale. Let me just clear everything. Alt R, S, and G. All right, so I just, you know, zeroed out my object, and your scale will scale up and down. X this way. Okay, straightforward, right? So if you want to manipulate your objects that way, use the tool panel over here. And then your transform is everything. It's all of these widgets combined into one. Now you might notice that as I rotate my object, you can clearly see that it's facing a different direction. The top is pointed off to the diagonal, but my widget is still facing up and down. And that's because it's using, what do you call this? Coordinates called global orientations. That's what orientations is the word I was looking for. So by default, it's set to global. And so your transform, your axes will always face up and down regardless of how you rotate or scale. But if we switch that to local, that is the orientation that your object is in. All right. So remember I was saying that it was the top part of the sphere was facing to the side. Now we can see just how true that is. The blue axis is facing off to the side. So that's local versus global. You can also change this to be view so that our axes are facing up and down according to the angle we're viewing at. That can come in handy as well. You've got several options in here that are worth playing with, but this is how you change the orientations. These are all crucial things to Blender, to 3D navigation and manipulation of objects in general. Though with the view, I believe it's a little odd in that, you know, our axes are not facing me as I orbit around, but if I change it back to view, you can see that it updates. So I wonder if that's a bug. But as far as I know, the view should always be facing you, no matter what direction you're looking at your object. Let's see if I'm missing any questions. No, not yet. Okay, so that's orientations. Talked about how to scale and move objects. Now, if I want to return an object to its original state, in other words, like clear out or zero out transformations, I can hold Alt and hit R to clear out rotations, S to clear out scale. I'm holding Alt, by the way, and then Alt G to clear out translations. And so now we can see our sphere is at the center of the world, which is its original location. And you can see that if I hit the In panel, that will bring up, or you can just hit this plus button right here. That will bring up your view properties, same as it did in Blender 2.79. And this is where you can see the actual values of your transformation. So, you know, if I move my sphere up, we can see that it's at a Z value of 2.7 meters. Moving to the left changes the X value. Y, you know, that changes the Y value, as you can imagine. Also with rotations, that's where you access that information, and that is a core concept that you need to be familiar with. Let's see, what else? Okay, so orientations. This is also an opportunity to explain what this crazy cursor thing is. The center of the entire universe is a sphere. Hey, I guess that's probably true. Is there a way to enable the subsurf modifier in edit mode from Golden Kitty? So yeah, this is, we'll get to edit mode, I think eventually. What time is it? 3:06. Yeah, we'll definitely get to edit mode. If I go there, you should be able to hit Control. Oh no. No, I guess there's not. So in past versions of Blender, in edit mode, you could hit Control 1, 2, or 3. The numbers representing how many subsurf values you're adding. I guess now there isn't a hotkey to do that. In object view, Control 2 still does add 2 levels of subsurf, 3 does 3 levels of subsurf, 4. So it still works in object mode, but apparently not in edit mode. That's kind of a bummer. Anything else? Cool. All right, so we've been talking about objects and how to create them, how to transform them. And that's pretty much all you need in order to start creating a scene. Like if I was going to create a snowman, I'm going to turn off this. I wish I could just turn off this manipulator. Oh, I can. So if I click on cursor or one of these other tools, the manipulator goes away. I think it's actually called the gizmo. And what I have not gone over is the hotkeys, I guess, for the transformation. So you can use the gizmo if you like. I know that Wayne Dixon uses it. He's a top professional. I tend to think of it being kind of a beginner training wheel sort of thing. But you can use these if you'd like. I prefer to just turn them off and use the hotkeys, which for translation, it's G, which makes sense, G for grab. So G, I can move it around, and then I can hit X. That will lock it to the X-axis. I can hit Z to log it to the Z-axis, Y. Very intuitive way of manipulating. And I like that I can do that without the gizmo, because gizmo just kind of gets in the way, in my opinion. So that is a nice feature that I've always loved about Blender. Same thing with rotation. Hit R, and then X to rotate around the X axis. Y, should probably do this with a cube so it's a little more obvious. Rotate X, rotate Z, that kind of stuff. So I love those hotkeys personally, and I would recommend them if you want to get fast. That's a faster way to manipulate stuff. Those hotkeys. Let me know if something I'm saying is not clear or not. What happened to the wireframe and Shift C? Good question. Shift C doesn't seem to be here anymore. Shift C used to kind of frame everything in the view. It's not, at least that's not the hotkey. Let's see. You can frame all. I don't know if that's the same thing, because Shift C also returned the cursor to the center. I wonder what that was. Yeah, I can't remember. Maybe that's gone. But so you can't Shift C. If you want to return the cursor to the center, I recommend just opening up the N panel and going to your 3D cursor and just setting all of these to 0. That's how you get it back to the middle. All right. Now, what happened to the wireframe? Wireframe's a little different. It's if you hit the Z key, you go into this like what is the word? A pseudo-transparent view. And while it looks good, if I'm honest, I'm not loving this new wireframe because sometimes I just want to see the wires, plain and simple. And currently there's not a way to do that as far as I know. You can turn on wireframe here in the overlays. A lot of the settings, if you use 2.79 over here that were viewport specific, like change the shading or matte caps, that kind of thing, they're up in this upper right corner, which is new to the Blender meta, so to speak. And in the overlays specifically, we can turn on wireframe. And it's very different how it works. You have this slider that kind of, as you go down, there's this threshold. And I don't really remember, I think it's the angle of the faces that, let's see, maybe it'll work here. Yeah, you can see on this object, it's a little more clear. As we go down, the wireframe, some of the wireframes disappear based on the angle of their edge. And then as we go all the way up to 1, it's full wireframe. So I'm very much on the fence about if I like this or not. You can see, like, I just don't know why I would ever really need this. Personally, it's hard to imagine how I would use it, but and you can't just go to full wireframe. If anyone knows how you can and I'm missing it, then let me know. Doesn't Shift S give you a cursor to center option? Shift S. Oh yeah, there it is. I always thought that Shift S cursor to center was like the center of your selection for some reason. Shift S cursor to center, but no, I guess cursor is how you zero out those values. So yeah, thanks for that tip. But anyway, the wireframe, that's how you deal with it now. I kind of would like to see a return to like a pure wireframe, at least to be an option, but we'll see. Oh, your quick favorites. You can add it to your quick favorites. I think I've seen that. What? Add to your quick favorites. Yeah, I don't remember what the quick favorites thing is, but it sounds familiar. I don't know. If you can point me out to where that is, I'll take a look at it. Okay, how to scale uniformly. Every time I try to scale, it goes in a direction only X, Y, or Z. So you if you just hit S once, like if I select this this sphere, hit S and scale, that should be how you scale uniformly. Only when you add another hotkey modifier like Z will it scale non-uniformly. So I'm not sure. Maybe you're talking about. Oh, maybe you're talking about using the widget. That's an interesting. Okay, so if you want to scale uniformly using the gizmo, you have to click in the center of this white circle. I never do this, so I just think that's much more finicky than hitting S and dragging. But that's how you do it if you want to use the gizmo. I think quick favorites is Q. Yeah, what? So how do I add to quick favorites? Do I, let's see, right click, add to favorites menu. That must be it. So view. Oh, that's a good option. Okay, so yeah, I think if I want to, let's see, what was I talking about? Shift S. If I wanted to add cursor to center to my favorites, I'll right click on that, add to favorites menu, and then if I hit Q, yeah, okay, you can start adding certain tools that you use a lot to that menu right there. If I want to add a mesh monkey head, I'll right click, add to favorites menu, hit Q in the viewport, and that's how you can have those two options. Add a monkey or center the cursor. That's pretty cool. I've honestly never used that, but that's a neat little feature. You can add practically anything to the Q menu. That is great to know. Anything else? Question, why do you always use Blender and Unity but not Blender and the Unreal Engine? So since you asked that, I'm actually working with a guy named Tom. We did a live stream with him. Let me point you to that real quick, because we are exploring the Unreal Engine, because we've heard enough requests for it that we are looking into it. But let me see if I can find. Where was that? Let me hit F, Tom. There it is. Interview with industry veteran Tom Wright. So if you go check that out, it's an interview I had with him, and he worked at Epic, right? So he worked at the place that develops the Unreal Engine, and he is a CG Cookie fan. He's starting to work with us now, and we're trying to get some content from him, some Unreal content. So we're actively pursuing that, just because we know that it's a popular thing. But keep an eye out for that Unreal content to come. We do have one tutorial about Unreal, but it's a fairly simple one. Maintaining visual consistency between Blender cycles and Unreal Engine. That's in our tutorial section, if you want to check that out. All right. Yes, okay, so we got some more excitement about Unreal. That's good to hear. We're working on it. Let's see. Scaling rotated objects seems broken for now. Yeah, so you're seeing that too. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what's going on. If I rotate and then hit SZ, something weird is going on with that. It's the global orientation specifically. So, maybe this is just an aspect of Blender Blender 2.8 being a work in progress that's causing that. But yeah, I don't know what to. That's just kind of quirky. A CG Cookie in Unreal, my day is made. Wow, okay, that's awesome. How do you do proportional editing? Okay, we'll dive into edit mode for this. So if you select an object, tab into edit mode, switch to vertices, which this is very different. I really do miss Control Tab, which brings up a pie menu now. But I miss being able to select vertices really quickly from there. But currently, the hotkey is 1 for vertices, and these are the hotkeys above your letter keys. So 1 verts, 2 edges, 3 faces. Yeah, I don't love that one for some reason. I really miss Control Tab. But go to verts. I'm going to select a vertex. That right-click select is kind of throwing me. Proportional editing is up at the top, in between your pivots and your transformation orientations. So right here, we can go to connected, and then start moving proportionally, which is kind of like a soft select. It's like an elastic movement sort of thing, a fall off to your motion, or your transformation. So that's how you do it. It's pretty much the same spot it used to be. It's just flipped to the top instead of the bottom. Any other questions? Overlay wireframe slider not working. Wireframe toggle does. If you're looking at just the cube, I would guess that that's the issue. Try and add a smooth mesh like the UV sphere, because if I go to overlays wireframe, I think that's the problem, because all the way at 0, the wireframe still shows up. I think it's just whatever the 90-degree angle on the edges of the cube is the problem. So I would guess that it is probably working, just not on the cube. But yeah, that wireframe, I don't know what I think about it. All right, so we've been answering questions. Okay, yeah, so now we can kind of, if you've been following along and it's making sense and you practice throughout the week of moving and orienting objects, you can start to create stuff with these primitives. So if I have this object and I want to create a snowman, so to speak, I can duplicate this object. Instead of having to go to the Shift-A add menu, I can instead hit Shift-D to duplicate. That's using the hotkey. Or you can go to Object, Duplicate Objects. And then let me start over. As soon as you hit Object, Duplicate Objects, you've duplicated the object and you enter into a translational mode. And so you're moving your duplicate right away. And that's very intuitive, actually. And from here, I can duplicate it straight up to create the next segment of a snowman. And then you can scale it down, make it a little bit smaller, intersect them a bit, and then Shift D again and make the head, right? So from here, basically with a cube, I can start adding Shift D, Y, or yeah, let's move it in Y. First, scale it way down. You know, you can start to create a smiling snowman just by duplicating these spheres. What will make it a little bit easier, you can snap to the surface. So up here in the snapping options represented by the magnet, if we enable that and change the snapping element to be face, then you can G, when you move, it's going to snap to the surface of any object in the scene. All right, so we can duplicate, Shift D, Shift D, which it's actually behaving a little bit erratically. Let's look at my snapping settings again. I'm going to change. Let's enable project elements. I think that's what I want to do. Yeah. So what that essentially does is instead of when I duplicate and move, instead of snapping the object to my cursor, it leaves it offset. And that's just a little bit more intuitive, in my opinion. All right. So we've created by snapping these spheres to the surface. Also, if you want to enable that on the fly, you can either leave it enabled perpetually or you can disable that. And then when I hit G and go into transform, hold Control, and then it will start snapping as long as you're holding Control. So snapping is actually a very powerful tool when you're manipulating objects. Otherwise, it would be a pain to come in here and make sure that they're all, you know, from various angles you're moving, making sure that it's penetrating a certain amount. By default, in the snapping menu, you're using the, we should have been using active. You can snap to the object origin. So that's the actual snapping source. So G and then holding, let's see. Yeah, G holding Control. I'm snapping that origin to the surface. Question, rulers are handy for real measurements. I dragged and created a few. Now I can't get rid of them. Yeah, so yeah, the ruler is what you're talking about over here. I've not used that. I don't know if it's if it's new to Blender 2.8 or what, but I've never really used the ruler tool. So let's see if we can. Okay. This also brings up a difference in how the ruler tool is used. All right, I'm kind of learning this myself. So conceptually for like 2.79 users, the tool panel works differently in that when you click the button, all it does is enable the tool rather than go into engaging the tool. Does that make sense? Previously, if we hit grab, for example, I would click grab, and then as soon as I start moving my mouse, it's grabbing and moving. That's the former behavior. Currently now I go into grab mode sort of, and the handles are there, and now I'm engaging the tool after clicking the button. So similarly with ruler, we hit ruler and then I can start left click dragging because I'm using right click select. It would be the opposite if I was using. Wait a minute, let me back up. I'm using right click select, and so the action is the left click button. So the ruler, I'm hitting left click and dragging a measurement, and that's only because the ruler tool is enabled. If I click off of the ruler tool, then they're gone. So if you want to delete those ruler options, I think you just click on it again. Oh, you click on maybe the end. Yeah, there's a little black dash at the very end of the ruler of the measurement, and you can just click on that and it should remove them. Double click the ruler line. So when I double click the ruler line, it adds an angle. You can only add one. Oh, that's interesting. Wow, playing with the ruler tool. So if you want to create an angle, why would you do it that way? That's kind of interesting. I'm not huh, that's cool. But you can't create multiple angles. That's by clicking in the middle, double clicking in the middle of the line. Yeah, you must have clicked the end. For anyone curious, annotate is the original grease pencil function. That is a great tip. Thank you, Jake. So if you want to draw, like make a note inside the viewport, annotate is the new way to do that. So hello, or it kind of looks like an A. Hella. That's how you can do that. You can draw, you know, sketches and stuff, grease pencil. It's actually very cool to annotate, you know. If you ever want to give notes on somebody's model, this is a great way to do that. Annotate is cool. Let's see if there's, I guess if you, how do we get rid of those quickly? We can erase by switching. If you hold down, clicking on the eraser and go down, you could choose various options. The eraser is how we can, I guess, get rid of those. They also exist as overlays, so I'm sure that you can just turn annotations off right there. So if you're, you know, annotations are kind of, annotations and rulers, these are all kind of visual utilities within the viewport. And if you ever want to turn those on or off, that's going to be found in the overlays. So we can turn off annotations, gizmos, let's see. Oh, ornaments, no? Ornaments will turn off, you know, like your camera and your light. How do we turn off? You can turn off your 3D cursor, which is new. I don't think you could ever do that previously. Yeah, so I guess the rulers are always there. You can't turn them off unless you switch out of the tool or delete them. Huh. Learning new stuff. Let's see if I'm missing any questions real quick. Did I say press Z for wireframe? I'm sorry if I missed that. Z, like usual, is the wireframe button. How to simple Boolean primitives. How to simple Boolean. Is that, I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure. I've never, outside of like using an add-on like Sculpt Toolkit or something like that, or Bool Tool, you know, the third-party add-ons. That's how I've found simple Booleans to work. We're getting a little bit out of the scope for beginners, but like, let's try and Boolean. I don't know how to simple Boolean, but let's assume that we can still add a Boolean modifier. So yeah, we can still do the Boolean. I don't know about simple Booleans. Yeah, one more thing is that the 3D cursor, you'll notice that wherever you click, it kind of aligns the 3D cursor to your view. And now if I orbit around, that cursor is still pointing at where I clicked, like the orientation of where I clicked. So that's kind of cool. It is officially a 3D cursor and not a 2D cursor in 3D space. Modifier. Okay, Saticus, it sounds like you might be like brand new to Blender. The modifier panel is hugely useful. Very much like 3D Studio Max's modifiers. I think that's what they were called. Is it? Yeah, I think so. But works very much like that. Appear as layers in the in panel under the annotation tab. Oh, there's an annotation? Ah, that is good to know. I did not know that before this. So if we add an annotate, I must have annotations turned off. I did not know that in the In panel, your View Properties panel, your annotations appear down here as layers, as well as rulers. Oh, this is just called ruler data, it looks like. What? For some reason you can't turn them off in here, though. It is data, but you can't turn them off. Yeah, I'm not sure why they appear there. Interesting. Interesting. It's kind of, all right, I should probably get back on track as far as, I mean, do you have any questions? Like, if you're brand new to Blender, do you have any questions about how to achieve the first exercise? Given that your kind of assignment for the week is to play around in the viewport, you know, don't really worry about the parameters over here, the settings, or the timeline, really. Just focus on the 3D viewport. If you literally do want to just focus on the 3D viewport, the new hotkey to maximize that 3D view is Control Space. And I think that's the same as Maya, if I recall. So like now we are literally just doing the 3D view. And you should be able to accomplish the exercise just with the 3D view by itself. Oh, I should say that delete. If you want to delete an object, select it and then hit Control X. That's not right. Not Control X, just hit X. And that brings up the delete menu. Or you can go to Object and delete at the bottom. Yeah, so if you have any questions, if you're a brand new beginner on what else you might need to know, I think you should have enough info to do the primitive scene. And you can look at examples of the primitive scene. If you go to 3D and exercises, well, let's just go to the class thread, actually. And the primitive exercise, you can see what other people are doing. Right, so we've got a cool rocket, we've got a lot of like rooms, because you can create a lot of shapes out of primitives if you scale them and rotate them. People can get really creative, like this swan. This is a fun thread to actually look for. Given the limitations, people can often go kind of crazy and create some really interesting things. You know, like this is a bunch of cubes creating like this tornado. Oh, that's exactly what it is. That's awesome. So yeah, have fun with this exercise. It's really just adding objects, manipulating objects, and positioning objects. It's pretty simple stuff. Homework is for this Sunday. Yeah, so if you can please submit your homework. And the way that you do that, if you go to the community thread, is simply by replying to the thread, but adding a title. So reply to this topic, homework week 1 submission, right? So add that title, maybe say something about it, like I was inspired by the tornado submission and decided to make a tidal wave. And then if like, this is a great opportunity to share anything that you learned. You know, after 2 hours, I was comfortable with Blender's navigation and transformation workflow. And then post an image, and you're done. And then I would bold that homework week 1 submission, or even change the paragraph font to like heading 3. I think you have access to do that. But anyway, that's how I will be able to know this is a homework submission and I can grade it and reply to you in the thread. So that's how you submit homework. Please do it before Sunday, Sunday at midnight. That'd be much appreciated. Oh, the school tab. Yeah, it's, I don't think I knew that you didn't see that, but it's, so like, you know, if you know a high school or a community college or something like that, that you can get a group rate of CG Cookie citizen memberships, and yeah, like a whole classroom can have a discounted access to our curriculum. So yeah, if you know any schools or anything, like ping us about it. We'd love to get them set up. That's what the school tab is for. Ciclo, I wish we could @ people in chat. You definitely can. What you have to do is, let's see. Let me move my chat. I'll show you real quick. So what you have to do is, if I hover over Aaron's username right here, I can right-click, copy link, or if you're using Chrome, you can just hover over it, and you can see in the bottom left corner of your Chrome window the link to that person. And if I paste that link, it's that last that's his username, the Cabbage Detective. So you can copy that, or just remove the rest and make that an @ symbol, and that's how you @ them. So now he'll get a notification about that. Sorry, it's not. We're going to upgrade this stuff, and we've had a lot of time to figure out how it can work better. But we will definitely upgrade that at some point. But it's a little more manual right now. And good, we're set up. Question: should I resubmit my homework to make it fall in line with the other homework submissions, or is its current spot in the forum good enough? Wilco, are you the one that submitted, like a week before or a few days before we got started? That's okay. I'll go and find yours, but you shouldn't. Instead of resubmitting, maybe just link me to, or post in the thread. If you don't see me add a grade soon, or by the beginning of next week, then just remind me in the thread, like, hey, my submission's on page 6 or something, and I'll go take a look. Let's see. All right, I don't think I'm missing any questions. Cool. Again, if you have any questions about what I've done in Blender, let me know. I think I've kind of hovered around how to accomplish the exercise. Beyond, if I just was going to fully flesh out this snowman, we need some arms, of course. So let's grab a cube. Where is that cube? Oh, yeah. So when you add something, it goes to wherever the 3D cursor is at. If your cursor is over here, add that cube. Your cube is going to be added there. Just so you know, like if you add it and you don't see where it was, it's going to be wherever the cursor has been. All right, so if we add this cube, I can scale it down to be really thin and then scale it in X a lot. Now it's going to represent like a stick. If you want some advanced scaling or transformation techniques, in addition to scaling in the local axis, you can also scale in every axis except a certain one. So you've got, if I want to scale this thing in every axis except X, I can hit S, Shift, X. All right, so now it's scaling in Y and Z, but it's maintaining the same length. So this is essentially serving to thicken up my cube, my rectangle, and that's actually very, very useful. So if we have this little stick of an arm, Shift D to duplicate, scale in X, and I can create some fingers. Shift D, R. There we go. Some other selection tools like box select. Just hit B, the letter B as in birthday, and then drag out a box that will be your box selection. You can hit Shift D to duplicate multiple things. R and Y, rotate them all around. There we go. Got this silly snowman. And yeah, if you did this, this is a passing submission for the homework. If you've never been in Blender, this is totally fine for submitting something of this quality. If you're experienced and you want to do the exercise, participate in the exercise, but explore a little bit more, if you want to add simple materials, maybe create some lighting or something, that's fine too. Don't show off. Don't make anybody feel uncomfortable. Share some tips about stuff as you go. This snowman demo is giving me flashbacks to the very first Blender tutorial I ever watched by Born CG, I believe. Yeah, I imagine this is probably a pretty standard type of exercise to do. It's nice to see the intersecting highlights between meshes. Yeah, that is pretty nice. So when you have an object selected, you can see the outline penetrate. That's definitely cool. I agree that I like that. Oh, carrot for the nose. Thank you. So a carrot would certainly be a different type of mesh primitive. It's going to be a cone. And then we can scale that up in the Z-axis and then down in all axes. Rotate it in X. Also, if you know you want to rotate or translate or scale a particular amount, let's say that I wanted this to be exactly 50% in size. I could hit S and then type 0.5, and this is exactly half of its scale. You can also hit R to rotate in X 90, and that'll rotate it 90 degrees. Now, if I want it the other direction, I can just hit the negative key, and that's how I've rotated it exactly 90 degrees to face forward. So that is a very handy way to go about that. Now, if you want to deselect everything, this has been one of my least favorite changes to Blender. Before, you could just hit A twice, so hit A to select everything and then A to deselect everything. Now you have to hit Alt-A to deselect everything. Don't love that hotkey, but that's what it is. All right, so we've got our carrot nose. We maybe need to add the buttons down the side, right? So I'll duplicate this cube, or this UV sphere, and maybe I'll scale it in Y to be a little bit, maybe scale in local Y, hitting Y twice. Oh, did I talk about that? I can't remember if I went over that. Whenever you use your hotkeys, like GX, you can hit X again to go into your local. Let me first rotate it a bit. So GX one time is going to be whatever orientations you have set here. That's going to be global. GX is global X. But then if I hit X again, it goes into local. And that is super helpful. X one more time goes back to just freeform movement. But just so you know, that's how you can, on the fly, scale in local as well. I'm going to scale local Y a little bit just to flatten out more of a button shape. And then I'm going to snap it. So these settings are good, but I'm going to hit G to go into transform and then hold snapping. But I don't want it to intersect the surface. So we can add a different, enable a different setting right here, align rotation, so that the Z axis will follow the surface. You can see how the sphere is orienting itself properly. It does mean that I need to Alt-S to clear the scale and then scale down in the Z axis to get a little bit flat. Scale all together, and then now as I snap to the surface, it's snapping and orienting itself very well. So Shift D, hold Control to snap. Now we've got some buttons, and they're all facing the proper orientation. I'm already used to Alt-A, and it works great. Maybe that's the benefit of being a beginner, not used to. Very true. If you're getting into 2.8 for the first time, which are you, Miranda? Is this your first time using Blender? I'm curious about that. But yeah, that is a benefit. You don't have to relearn muscle memory. But I'm also curious, do you, like for me, the Alt-A hotkey has proven kind of difficult to like perform while not looking at the. It's like it requires a movement of my fingers, more so than it did previously. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of more cumbersome to do. But maybe I'm just being picky. Oh, okay, 2 months, awesome. What is the expected release date of 2.8? October 20th is on the schedule, and we'll see if they hit it. 2.8 was kind of a nightmare of always being delayed, but it looks like 2.8, they're pretty much on schedule, so maybe August or October 20th. Question, why is it called a UV sphere? Why is it called a UV sphere? If I hit Shift A mesh, let me think about this. I don't know. I really don't know why it's called a UV sphere. Maybe just, I mean, this is an icosphere, so it's just like a sphere made up of triangles. I think of the Epcot ball or whatever. Speaking of when you add an object or when you perform an operator, I'm sorry, you still have options for that operator immediately after you either add an object or perform an operation. So right here for the icosphere, I can change the subdivisions to make it a higher resolution, a smoother sphere. And then if I move it, this changes to the translate options, and I can further manipulate it that way. So that's an option, like, I forget what it's called, but like immediate tool options are going to be available right down here, and you can hide that if you don't need it. But sometimes that can be very handy. I know, like, if I use the bevel tool, let's see, if I wanted to, I especially use it when beveling, being able to manipulate this stuff. So anyway, that's just an option. All right, so I think we can start wrapping up the stream. I wanted to keep this simple. We're not diving into edit mode. That's not the expectations for this homework. Just stay in object mode. Concentrate on navigating around the 3D view, creating objects, manipulating objects. The menus you want to be aware of are, like your view menu here. This is where you can look at different viewpoints, navigation options, check out the view. Selection options are right here, pretty obvious, adding objects, and then specific object operations are also here. So these 4 menus are kind of, if you're in doubt about this week, that's where you're going to look for stuff. Yeah, and I think that's kind of all that I had in mind to cover. If you have any last minute questions, let me know, and I'll try and answer them real quick, but wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so. So Kent, in the view align, view center, cursor, and view all, you can set the shortcut for the old function. Oh, in view align, align view, and oh, there it is, center, cursor, and view all. That's what you just said. That is the old functionality. So that's the old Shift C, and we can add align view, right click. I don't recommend beginners doing this, by the way, but you can right click on stuff and set a shortcut, and you can add whatever you want here. So that's a great ability to customize. I don't recommend doing that until you're more familiar with Blender, the defaults, and then you can kind of, because sometimes you can steal a hotkey from another tool, and then if you watch a tutorial and they say press Shift S, but you've made that another hotkey, you could be confused as to like why it's not working. But that is a very valid option for more experienced users to be able to get back that old functionality by adding a custom hotkey. The last thing about hotkeys on that note is that if we open the splash screen, Blender 2.8 does allow us to use the 2.7x hotkeys. So we can switch the interaction to 2.7x, and now we've got all our old hotkeys back. You hitting A twice does deselect selection. What are some others? Shift C is already there. That's what it does. So you can switch back and forth, and I don't know. I'm kind of curious because when they went from 2.4 to 2.5, I don't think they offered that option. I think that you just had to go into 2.5 and accept whatever hotkeys had been changed. If I'm wrong about that, correct me, but I think that they did not give that an option. So I'm kind of wondering if like the Blender community will be split, since they offer the ability to change your interaction. If we'll have a faction of the Blender community that just sticks with 2.7, and then you have another faction go with 2.8. I'm curious about that. But if you get frustrated, you have the option to go to 2.7x. But I'm kind of getting on board with the new Blender meta and going with the new default. That's what I'm trying to train myself to do. That would be my first recommendation. But if you're an experienced user, you've been using Blender a long time, you're a grown up, so to speak, and you can do what you want. Anything else? Hit it with a hammer. Does it have anything to do with UV mapping? I'm sure it does. You're talking about the UV sphere again, or still. I mean, you can UV wrap anything. So I don't know why it specifically is called that. I think it's specifically how all these segments come to a point up at the top. I think that has to do with it being like characteristically UV sphere. But as far as unwrapping, you can go to sphere projection. Let's see what that looks like in the UV image editor. Yeah, I'm not sure if that I'm kind of off in left field with that, but yeah, I guess it's just called a UV sphere. That's kind of my knowledge on the subject, the extent of it. So yeah, if you want to have fun with Blender, this is the last thing I'll say and close out, is the shading is super fun. So if you want if you want to customize like what you're looking at in the viewport, you know, you can change through various studio lighting here. I mean, just play around with everything. That's the best advice. Play around with it, have fun. The matte caps are absolutely beautiful. Yeah, play with these things. They're really high quality, super fun. On that note, though, you can see that by default, Blender's shading is faceted, so it's hard edged. If you don't want that to be the case, you can select everything, go to Object, Shade Smooth. All right, and now it's going to look like it doesn't have that faceting look anymore. But yeah, play around with the shading if you want to have an additional optional set of fun this week for new beginners. Play around with the matte caps and the studio lighting. Let's see what else. Well, there's EV, of course. Anyway, play around with these shading options. They're a lot of fun. I'll just tease that. It's one of the biggest new improvements coming to Blender, and the viewport can just look stunning at this point. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. Any last-minute questions? Anyone know where EV is? Okay, I actually just did that. So, EV is technically in... I'll show you real quick. Control space to bring up... I think it is on by default, and you can find that in your render settings, Render Engine EV. So I think it is by default, and if you go to your render mode, so this is like displayed, what's it called, solid view right here, and then this is texture or material view. They call it look dev, and then this is actually EV, the right one, which is a rendered view. And you can change that to cycles, or you can change that to EV. That's how you access EV, and then it will start to respect if you add a light. Let's see here, a point light. It will start to respect that. So yeah, you can have a lot of fun with EV if you want. That's how you access it, and it'll start to respect all the materials that you build. Principal BSDF, basic color. So yeah, you can have fun that way if you want. That's how you access Eevee. Oh gosh, the orange is bad. The orange is maybe bad on a sphere if you're talking about this one. It might look bad on a sphere, but let's add Mesh Suzanne, or Mesh Monkey. Control 3. Let's maybe smooth it out. You know, it doesn't look bad on a monkey. It kind of looks like a... it reminds me of like a thread, like an anisotropic... if you ever seen a spool of thread, that's what it sort of reminds me of, with that long highlight. But anyway, for your experienced users, play around with Eevee and the lighting. It's so much fun. Oh my goodness, it's fun. Play around with these settings, and we'll talk. The next class, by the way, sneak preview in October. I want to do a shading and lighting class for advanced content, and we're going to talk a lot about Eevee at that point in time. So I'm not going to cover that so much here in this class. But anyway, checking for last minute questions. When will I be able to watch the recording of the Retoplo Flow stream? I will check on that. Usually it's 24 to 48 hours, but since Jay since Jonathan Williamson did that one, he might not have been aware of that particularly. So anyway, I'll look at that and make sure we get that uploaded and archived. William, sorry about the delay. When I open Blender, the texture in the cube is black. It might be a problem with my PC, or should I wait for a future version? So you have installed the default 2.8, and let's see. There we go. That's the question I'm reading. So do you have default 2.8 installed, and as soon as you open it, you have a black cube? If that's the case, that is a little bit strange. I would then ask, like, what are your computer specs? How old is it? I don't think I've been missing any other questions. Sorry, William, I see that you had to double post. Sorry about that. That's bizarre. And Andres, yeah, what are your computer specs? I'm curious, because I don't think you should need a crazy computer to be able to run it. Andres, if you keep getting that error, let's cover that. Let's figure that out in the community thread, because yeah, we need to get to the bottom of that. If it's your computer, 16 gigs of RAM, that should be plenty. Check your off the top of my head, trying to troubleshoot this. Is your cycles compute? Nah, that wouldn't do anything, would it? If you're an OpenCL or none, I'm not sure about that. Let's try and figure that out in the community thread. I definitely want to get that solved, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. Don't think it's hardware related. What happens when you go to File, Load Factory Settings? Try that. See if that helps. I wonder if there's like a preset or somehow a preference that's kind of making that wonky for you. I'm not sure. Cool. All right, we'll figure it out in the community thread for sure. Thank you guys for being here. Very excited to get this class started. I will see you live again next week, but I will be present all week long in the community thread to answer questions, grade homework, that kind of thing. And yeah, and if you want to be a volunteer assistant, don't forget to email me. I'd be very appreciative of that. So thanks, everybody. Shout out to the Discord channel. Check that out. It's, I guess, technically like an unofficial CG Cookie channel as far as I know, but I need to peek in on it myself. So thank you for sharing that. Rev especially, and I think Phil. So thank you guys. I will see you later, and I'm going to end with this slick outro card. Let's see if I can do this well. I think you can still hear me. So goodbye. We'll see you next time.